The blaring of the factory alarm was what woke both Absentee and I the next morning. I had no idea what time it was, but it didn't matter, seeing I had not slept well. The fact that I was in a place of death and horror had me wide awake the entire night, and I doubt that I was the only pony within this place that was restless. I had only been here for less than one night, while others, like Absentia, had been here for countless years. The factory was their home now, as was it mine. But not for long. I didn't plan to stay in this factory. I had to get in, do what I came here to do, and get out. Absentia groaned as she rose from the bed, following a message over an intercom. The voice was all too familiar, and made my blood boil at the sound of it. The Overmare, Rainbow Dash.
Good morning, workers. As you all know, our latest group of failures caused our beautiful machine's blades to jam, and the next import of failures will arrive in 2 days. So, some pony will have to clean those blades, and since I know all of you will refuse, the worker will be chosen randomly from our worker database. Also, due to last night's storm, our main power supply was damaged by a lightning strike, causing the security cameras to lose power. Some pony will have to fix that as well, but be careful not to get electrocuted. As for our spectra handlers, the amounts of spectra produced are dropping. Therefore, a meeting will be held to fix that issue. Now, on to choosing the worker to clean the Pegasus device.
The way Rainbow Dash spoke was unlike anything I had ever heard. It was a cold and ruthless tone. It was as if she didn't care at all for her workers, and only cared that Pegasi were being murdered through the Pegasus device. How could Rainbow Dash pull off such a misleading act as a pony who represented loyalty, defeated evil tyrants, and inspired other Pegasi, when she was really a cold-hearted monster? It blew me away at just how well Rainbow Dash could pull it off, after countless years of being the Overmare in this factory. The intercom static was replaced with Rainbow Dash's cold voice once more.
The worker cleaning the Pegasus device will be 067138.
Absentia gave me a look of horror as I raised an eyebrow. What? That's you? She confirmed. My heart dropped as I saw the numbers embedded into my name tag on my suit. It was as if Rainbow Dash was taunting me. Why? Why did that have to be my first assignment? Not to mention that I couldn't clean that machine in this heavy suit. My cover would be blown. Damn it! What do I do, Absentia? Hey, calm down. She started, putting her hooves on my shoulders. First, don't panic. Otherwise, you're going to expose yourself to the orchestrators that survey the factory floor. I'll be honest with you, Scoots. There's nothing you can do except obey and watch your back every second you're in that machine. There's only one way in and out of that thing. So you'll need to be absolutely careful and just do your best to get the task done ASAP. However, there's one thing needed to be done before you even think of stepping into that machine. So come here. I raised an eyebrow at the comment, answering with an appropriate response. What for? That mane of yours is just asking to get tangled up in those blades. So, I'm going to save you a potentially easy way to die and cut it short enough to where it won't get caught in anything. That wasn't a bad suggestion. It would help with my identity, and Absentia wasn't kidding about my mane. It was long and unkempt after years of no maintenance. Strangely, I had grown in my time in the void as if I'd never stopped living, and that had always taken me aback, seeing most say that when you die, you don't age beyond death. But I had aged and grown into an adult mare, so either ponies were wrong about life after death, or the void had properties to it that were beyond my understanding. The sound of Absentia impatiently clearing her throat made me come back to reality, deciding not to question her any further, and walking to where she was. I planted my flank on the cold floor as she pulled a knife from the drawer next to her small bed that she had outgrown over her years in this place. She lightly lifted and tugged my mane to where it was sturdy enough to cut through with ease, stating only one thing before starting the task. It's not going to be anything pretty, just something good enough to prevent getting caught on anything in that machine. So, hold still, and don't cry when you see your reflection. I nodded, doing my best to keep my head still and feeling the blade's edge touch the outer strands of my tangled fleece. With accuracy and gentle care, Absentia applied the first cut, the cold still cutting through as if my hair were made of butter, and after meeting the opposite side of my mane, Absentia tossed it into a nearby garbage. The weight upon my head had lowered massively as she worked more toward my neck, cutting it to where it only stood 2 inches off of my neck. So, what's your story, Absentia? I asked, attempting to make conversation. Nothing important, kid. She answered rather quickly. I didn't accept that. I don't think so. Something tells me that you're different from other workers here. Absentia winced at my words, and with that, I knew my assumption was correct. What makes you say that? For all you know, I could be pulling a ruse and be waiting for the right moment to kill you. I could slit your neck right here if I wished. I know you won't, because I know very well that you could have easily overpowered me last night. But you held back, hoping I'd just kill and free you from this place. If you were like the others, you would have taken me to Rainbow Dash and had me thrown into the Pegasus device. Another wince. She hadn't expected me to be so thorough, and that was enough to break through the mask she wore to avoid looking weak in Rainbow Dash's eyes. I'd managed to break through her true self that existed before the horrors of the Rainbow Factory had corrupted her mind and personality. I'll give you one thing, Scoots. You are excellent at reading ponies. You're right. I did hold back last night in hopes of you breaking my neck or suffocating me into the bliss that is death. I've wanted death to greet me ever since I became Rainbow Dash's second in command, having to do things that I could never forgive myself for. I never dreamed of becoming an elite flyer, but my parents forced me to. I was doomed from the moment I signed the document that admitted me into the flight academy. I was never good at flying and wanted to actually become a model for magazines, because where I failed in flying, I made up in beauty. Believe it or not, my mane used to be full of long curls, and I was admired by most Pegasi as a fashion icon. I had caught the eye of a very well-known company in the fashion industry, and had even landed a spot as a model, up until my parents got in the way and ruined it all. I was sent to flight camp before I could even have a chance at my dreams, and as soon as I failed, was taken here to be grinded into Spectra. Hope the bastards are proud now. A pang of anger and sorrow pierced my heart. Absentia's dreams had been taken from her out of selfishness and pride, only to be replaced with assured death. However, the fact that she was alive rendered that ending impossible, so that led to my next question. What did you have to do to get on Rainbow Dash's good side? Absentia sighed, continuing to cut further up my neck. Things that I regret. When I was admitted with another Pegasi that gave me shit on a daily basis. I was confused and lost, and had no idea what to do, what to think in the darkness of the factory. During the first night, the effects of the factory plagued my mind, and I decided to get some much-needed revenge. The asshole that had treated me like shit all my years in flight camp was at his most vulnerable, so I took my opportunity and beat him to a pulp. He begged for my forgiveness, but he didn't deserve it, so I killed the ungrateful bastard. Absentia's voice was cold and bitter, with a hint of sorrow and grief. The sound of her words made my ears twitch, along with the sound of her blade slicing through my mane. I shivered as Absentia continued her story that I had asked for. After he was dead for sure, I had expected to feel happy or satisfied. I didn't feel like either of those things, and instead felt sad, horrible, and looked at myself as a monster. I had killed one of my own fellow Pegasi, and despite all he had done to me, I felt terrible. If anything, I was no better than Rainbow Dash. It became clear the next morning when Dash came to the containment room and saw what I had done. Blood was everywhere, and I was covered with it. Dash took it as an opportunity and made me into a factory worker on the spot. I'll never forget that devilish smile and stare. She had just laughed and applauded me for my actions, and after the fact, had patted me on the head and said only two things. "You may be worthless to all Pegasi as a flyer, but it's clear you have use to me in another way. Welcome to the weather factory, worker." I couldn't believe I was still alive, and I had only been relieved that I had been given another chance. However, not long after, I had wished that Dash had killed me that day. I had been forced to end others' lives over simple mistakes that hadn't even affected the factory or its process in committing murder to produce artificial rainbows. However, that's not what Dash thought, and had tasked me with smashing their skulls against the ground until their brains littered the floor. The sounds of their final moments still echo in my mind, and their faces haunt my dreams. I have never lost count of how many I killed, and will never forgive myself for letting my fear and hope for survival result in the gruesome end of 17 ponies that were no different than me. Pink Diamond, Minty Fresh, Stormy Cloud, Windy Trail, Blue Skies, Ember, Lightning Flash, Starry Night, Sunny Day, Dazzle Flash, Shining Star, Snowflake, Rocky Twister, Silverwing, Twinkle Star, Ivy Rain, and Starry Breeze. Their lives all taken in gruesome manners by my own hooves. It wasn't until 7 years after the day I killed my worst enemy that I was finally promoted and freed of my role as an executioner to Pegasi who didn't meet Dash's standards. I was beyond relieved, up until I had learned why. And to avoid ending up like him and the filly that had joined him in their escape attempt, I just buried the old me and learned to just follow the rules and play along. Her story nearly brought tears to my eyes, realizing that if any pony wanted to get on Rainbow Dash's good side, they'd have to do something so morbid that it would cause the pony to become some pony they weren't. Luckily for me, I planned to do it another way, unless an opportunity was given. I will kill the bitch, along with this factory. How long have you been here? 20 years, kid. Long enough for me to forget my birth name, become a hollow shell of nothing but pain and trauma, and devoid of any sort of feeling or emotion. Something no pony would ever want to become unless their life depended on it. I could only imagine Absentia's pain. She had been here for 20 years. 20 long years of murder and nightmares. I had been dead for countless years before I was reborn into this living hell. Only this time, things were going to be different. Absentia had finished the haircut to where my mane was only 2 inches off my neck and head. An easy buzz cut to where I looked just like Absentia. There. Now you look like the rest of the workers and are safe from any potential danger while inside that death machine, said Absentia. Out of the silence of the room, the intercom erupted once more with the sound of Rainbow Dash's cold voice.
Worker 067138, report to the factory floor.
Absentia gave me a look of severity. Best go before she comes looking for you. Her and her security squad. I nodded my head as I turned to leave up until I was stopped by Absentia. Oh, almost forgot, said Absentia, grabbing something from her nearby makeshift closet that was nothing more than a hole in the wall. You might want to put this on. Absentia tossed a black rubber suit toward me, which I recognized as the same one she wore. I didn't question her and quickly slipped on the flexible rubber suit. It was surprisingly comfortable and fit me perfectly. Once the uniform was on, Absentia handed me a small button, one that had the label of the weather factory on it. You'll need that, or Dash will be all over you. I stuck the small button on the suit, feeling a sick feeling come over me. I looked just like one of the factory workers, a fact that I refused to accept, seeing I was only wearing it temporarily. It was the only way I could stay out of Rainbow Dash's sights. Good luck, Scouts. You'll need it. I nodded my head as I turned to exit the room and make my way to the factory floor, but was stopped shortly by Absentia yet again. Hey, kid. She called out, to which I turned to look back at her. Yeah? Thanks for the chat. I smiled and nodded my head before turning to the door and exiting to the factory. Through the night, Absentia had given me some pointers on how to get to the factory floor without an elevator, due to her being here for 20 years and gaining access to the places that most of the workers don't know of. Rainbow Dash and Absentia must be close to know of all the secret passageways within the factory. There was secret halls, staircases, and even simple tricks to get past the scanners on the doors. Tricks I needed to know if I planned to survive here. As I walked across the skywalk, I passed other factory workers, each of them looking at me with looks of curiosity. All of them were orchestrators, due to their outfits being just like mine. Each of them wearing their own share of scars, and manes cut just like mine. Absentia wasn't kidding when she said I would look just like every factory worker. But even though I looked like the workers, I was far from safe. I was scared to death, because one wrong move is all it would take to earn a one-way trip through the Pegasus device. so I had to be on alert at all times. At the end of the skywalk, I was accompanied by a familiar face. There stood the Cyan Pegasus with her rainbow mane and rosy pink eyes. There stood Rainbow Dash, the mare I despised with all of my being. She was winged by 2 other guard ponies, holding 2 electric spears, meaning I couldn't attack. Not now. My anger rose on the inside as I stood less than 2 feet from her. I rose a hoof to my forehead as she examined me from head to hoof, giving me a look that spoke pure death.
"You're late,"
stated Rainbow Dash with an annoyed sigh.
"I'll let this mishap slip for now, but I expect better manners from now on, worker."
The little amounts of sense that I had left were the only thing keeping me from lunging forward, as I swallowed my pride in response.
"Yes, ma'am,"
I spoke, swallowing the small amount of vomit I had in my mouth. She didn't say anything, only moved her head closer to mine, looking at me closely. I noticed a nasty scar just visible on her forehead, which I figured was from the anonymous Pegasus that stated he had left a nasty impression on her head during his escape attempt. It had even left a dent in her skull, changing Rainbow Dash's appearance as the once bold Pegasus she used to be, and instead showing her more as the monster she really was. Her sudden observation toward me made me feel uncomfortable, and only grew more uncomfortable as she raised her right hoof toward my head. I expected her to do something, but all she did was gently brush her hoof against my mane, watching small bits of loose strands of my freshly cut mane fall to the floor.
"Hygiene. Work on it. I won't deal with shedding around my factory."
Will do, ma'am," I replied, continuing to hold my breath.
"Good. Now, let me show you to your station,"
she said, turning from me and placing her hoof against the scanner of the elevator. I followed her as the elevator doors slid open and I, along with the rest of the party of murderous Pegasi, entered the small space. The entire time I stood in the elevator, I had to hold back the urge to attack, but I knew what the outcome would be if I attacked. If I was going to get Rainbow Dash, I had to wait until she was unguarded. I had to play my cards right, and right now was not the time to play the ace. I just have to wait and stay out of trouble. If only it were that easy. The elevator came to a stop on the factory floor, where I could see the Pegasus device in full light of the fluorescent lights that hung from the rafters. The giant grinding machine was silent, and I was about to enter its blades. My heart skipped a beat as Rainbow Dash approached the bottom of the machine, a small slot leading to the inside of the device open, and a long hose off to the side of the opening.
"Your job is simple. You just have to use this hose to spray the blades, but not just the bottom blades, all the blades. I want this thing spotless. Not a single speck of remains from the last run better be visible when I check back, worker. Or there will be consequences. Got it?"
Yes, ma'am.
"Good. Now get to work,"
she commanded, handing me the hose. Rainbow Dash turned from me as I held the hose in my hooves. My anger level was at its peak, but I kept myself calm. Now was not the time to strike. I would just have to cooperate for now and stay out of trouble.
"Water on,"
commanded Rainbow Dash as I noticed a worker on the far side of the room turn a water valve, immediately following a high pressure within the hose. Water instantly burst out of the end, nearly causing me to lose my grip, but I somehow managed to hold on. "Remember, not a single speck, worker," stated Rainbow Dash as she walked out of sight. Once she was gone, I immediately turned to the inside of the machine and started to clean the blades. The sharp, elongated daggers were coated with dry blood, chunks of rotting flesh, and some clumps of meat that hadn't cycled through. The bottom section of the machine was coated with bone and teeth fragments, several fur fragments that were a plethora of colors, and blood stains along the walls of the interior that had been the result of the deaf device's last meal. The area reeked of the smell of lead and death, nearly causing me to vomit, but I powered through the overwhelming stench somehow, remembering Absentia's words clearly. I did my best to just blank out the smell, and decided to start with the bottom of the machine, seeing it was easily the most accessible section of the inside for a much thorough cleaning job. I aimed the hose at the steel walls and washed away all of the blood that had stained them. It didn't take much effort, the high pressure of the water stream making quick work of the stains as I did a 360 to be sure I got every bit of the crimson litter. After a good 5 minutes, the entire bottom was as clean as it could get, so I moved to the upper section, aiming the water stream at the stained blades above me. Once again, the high pressure made quick work of the clutter, releasing their hold on the steel with just one hit of the raging water. Upon contact, the blades spun as well, making my job easier and faster. I kept the hose aimed at the spinning blades while making sure to wash every inch of the blades as well, knowing that Rainbow Dash hadn't been lying about anything she'd said prior to entering the machine. I had to be absolutely sure I got every inch and groove of the massive metallic teeth spotless. Otherwise, I'd become the next meal for the Pegasus device. I just kept repeating those words in my mind as I continued to spray the blades clean of the debris left by whoever had last met their end through this machine, up until something broke my concentration. A deafening roar pierced my eardrums as I lost my grip on the hose, the metal floor beneath me beginning to rumble at the magnitude of a massive earthquake. The machine had been awoken with me inside of it. My worst fear had become reality. I immediately abandoned my task and turned toward the exit, only to find that it was shut tight and the hose was still spraying out and filling the lower floor of the machine with water at an alarming rate. I was trapped. My heart sunk at the realization of the situation as I scrambled to find any solution. The roar of the inside of the machine made it hard to think straight, but I knew I had to act fast, so I pulled my thoughts together amongst the chaos and formulated my options of escape. I couldn't go up without being grinded to pulp, so waiting for the water to raise me up wasn't an option, and I couldn't open the only escape door because it was locked. My only literal option was to either yell and hope some pony would hear me from among the sound of the Pegasus device's roaring engine, or I'd have to hope that the hinges of the door were as fragile as glass. The water level was rising quick, so with all of my strength, I took a deep breath and bucked both of my back hooves against the door, hoping that the hinges would shatter upon contact. As expected, the door remained shut and didn't budge an inch, immediately causing me to enter panic mode. "Help!" I yelled, praying for some pony to hear me from among the deafening rumbling of the machine. As expected, no pony could hear me, and to make matters worse, the water was already to my upper torso. My time was running out. "Help!" I continued to buck my hooves against the door, the water making it hard to exert any sort of force against the door. The water level was at my neck now, and my heart was racing at a rapid pace. I didn't have any other options except death. I couldn't budge the door, and I couldn't go up. I was dead. I had failed again. The water was now just past my muzzle as I took my final breath of life and dunked myself underneath the water. Underneath the water, I searched for any sort of alternative that could save me as a last-ditch effort, but only one option came to me in the murky water, and I doubted that it would even work. The water pressure from the hose might be enough to force open the door, or was I just wishful thinking now? Seeing my options were not the best, I decided to try it, quickly grabbing the hose from the floor of the machine and aiming the nozzle at the door, praying for my efforts to be rewarded with freedom. However, fate taunted me, and the door remained stiff and strong. I was dead. Despite my efforts, my second chance at life had been cut shorter than my original life in Ponyville. I dropped the hose as my lungs began to collapse from the lack of oxygen in the cold and murky water. In my final moments, the burning sensation in my chest turned into serenity in the dim light of my second grave. My body began to turn numb as I saw my life flash before my eyes for the second time, and in my defeat, I spoke my last humiliating words. Congratulations, Rainbow Dash. You win again. With that final statement, I took my last breath, feeling the cold liquid surrounding me turn my chest into ice. My sight became blurry and lifeless, falling into a deep darkness, and in a cruel twist of fate, the Pegasus device had killed me once again.
Come on, kid.
Spoke a distant voice as my eyes slowly opened. The voice was familiar, a voice I had heard before. I could feel a force against my chest as well, like two rough hooves pressurizing against my upper chest.
Come on. Wake up.
Spoke the voice again. The voice became more clear as I felt a large amount of water escape my lungs and extract from my mouth onto the cold floor. I started to cough massively, coming back to reality. I was next to the Pegasus device, and Absentia was just above me, wearing a face of worry and horror. Her hooves were wet, as were mine, along with the rest of my body. That's when I remembered what had happened as I lunged upward, only to be pushed back down by Absentia. "Hey, easy, kid," she stated. Out of my blurred vision, I struggled to speak, breathless and dumbfounded on what had come to pass. What happened? You tell me. I just saved your life. The door was locked from the outside of the machine. My head was groggy as I attempted to stand up. Some pony, trapped me in the machine. It was no accident, but an attempt to kill me. I snapped, continuing to cough. Absentia gave me a look of severity. We both knew who had set it up.
"What in Equestria happened here?"
shouted a familiar voice. Rainbow Dash walked toward Absentia and I, her face angry.
"I gave you a simple assignment, and what happens? My factory floor ends up flooded."
She snapped. Absentia objected to Rainbow Dash's words, seeing it was clear that this attempt was set up.
"Hold it, Dash. Some pony deliberately locked her in from the outside in an attempt to drown her. I had to save her, and even performed CPR for 10 minutes before she came back to life."
Rainbow Dash expressed an angry look, but surprisingly calmed down.
"Is this true, worker?"
Catching my breath and continuing to cough, I gave her my best response.
"Yes, ma'am. I was locked inside the machine while doing the task I was assigned. The machine started unannounced, and the door was shut from the outside by some pony in an attempt to kill me."
Rainbow Dash sighed as a response, grabbing her radio from her belt.
"Security, I want you to check the footage of all the cameras positioned around the Pegasus device. Apparently, the worker assigned to cleaning it was nearly killed due to some pony intentionally closing the only exit and locking it from the outside."
Yes, ma'am. Give me around, an hour to go through the footage, and I'll get the results back to you as soon as possible.
"Copy that. Get to work."
Rainbow Dash replied. After finishing her short conversation with the security pony over the radio, Rainbow Dash turned to Absentia and I with a strict look.
"You two better not be lying, or I'll have both of you disposed. This little mishap has cost me valuable time, and now I need to postpone the arrival of the next group of Pegasi."
Her gaze met mine instantly, her magenta eyes glaring at me with murderous intent.
"You! Get out of my sight. You better pray to Celestia that the footage proves your claims true."
Her gaze averted to Absentia.
"As for you, Absentia, you'll take over this failure's duty. I trust that you can finish the job in time and without any sort of issue."
Affirmative, ma'am.
"Good. Then get on it."
Rainbow Dash commanded, to which Absentia followed immediately. Following Absentia's departure, Rainbow Dash turned her gaze back to me. She eyed me in a way a predator would stalk its prey, but said nothing. It felt as if a spotlight were on me on a stage, but instead of it being on me to present me as the main focus, it felt like tiny daggers were being shot at me, tearing me apart thread by thread. I just tried to remain calm and give no reason for her to suspect me any further, and after what felt like eternity, Rainbow Dash finally averted her gaze elsewhere and left without another word. The silence scared the living hell out of me, seeing I had no idea what she was thinking in her head. There was no use in worrying about it now though, so I did as Rainbow Dash had told me and took off out of sight, unaware of what was to come for the remainder of my first day in the hell known as the Rainbow Factory. The bell for lunch rang, causing me to jump in my anxious state of paranoia and fear. After the confrontation with the mare I hated most, I just returned to Absentia's room and thought about all that had happened that morning. The first thing I knew about the situation was that some pony was out to kill me, but had failed out of some sort of miracle that I had been spared just in time. I may have survived for now, but when would they strike again? And more importantly, why did they want me dead? Did they actually know who I was and saw me as a threat to Rainbow Dash? I hadn't expected this much to happen so fast, but it was clear that I wasn't safe here at any time. The second thing I realized was that Absentia was not afraid of Rainbow Dash, given how she'd acted in response to Dash's outrage aimed at me. She hadn't even hesitated or questioned the potential consequences, and judging by how my greatest enemy had reacted to Absentia's defense towards me, it was clear both mares had a good amount of trust in each other. Therefore, making an alliance with Absentia had been a huge advantage in my mission, seeing she was the closest pony to Rainbow Dash and knew almost everything about her. She was easily my best ally here, and my best shot at getting close enough to Rainbow Dash to end her life once and for all. But it was clear that my target had eyes watching me, and that getting close enough to land the fatal blow wouldn't be easy. It made sense. She was the overmare, and all of her workers were like pawns on a chessboard guarding the king. I just have to find a way around those pawns to checkmate the bitch into death. But that would take time and patience. The door to the room opened, causing me to jump yet again, but my nerves calmed once I saw that it was Absentia. I didn't say anything and just allowed her to talk, seeing it was clear just by her expression that she was here to say something important. "Thought I'd find you back here," she started, continuing to hold the same expression as she continued. "Come on, Dash wants to speak with you about the events of this morning." I didn't argue and just did as she said, feeling the pit of my stomach start to become unstable at the thought of Dash's verdict. Would she actually give Absentia and I a fair judgment and be truthful about the results of the footage, or would she just lie and kill both of us for free Spectra? She was already delayed, so the latter seemed far more likely than what I hoped. But maybe Rainbow Factory Dash had some sense to her, and actually gave a damn about her workers. The answer was unclear to me, as we made our way to the factory floor via the elevator, and met back up with Rainbow Dash by the machine that had nearly taken my life a second time. One glance at her, and immediately I could tell that she had calmed down from her demeanor in our last confrontation. Something that gave me hope as she met our company upon hearing our approach. "I brought her, Dash," Absentia confirmed, leading the recipient to nodding her head. "Excellent. You may go join the others for lunch, Absentia." Dash responded rather calm and, strangely, in a tone more close to the Pegasus I'd once admired like a god. Absentia took her leave, leaving me alone face to face with the monster I had a burning desire to kill. However, I knew this was neither the right time or place to do so, so I just kept eye contact and continued to play my mirage of a factory worker. "You wanted to see me, ma'am?" "Affirmative, worker. I received the footage results, and it turns out you're in the clear. Some pony did indeed trap you in the Pegasus device and increase the water pressure to intentionally drown you. Something I find disgusting and unacceptable in my factory." I was relieved. I'd dodged a fatal bullet. But the fact remained that some pony was out to kill me. Dash practically read my mind, placing a hoof on my left shoulder.
Unfortunately, our little rat is smart, seeing we couldn't identify them due to them being fully clothed in a full bodysuit. But don't worry, worker. I recognize the severity of the situation and am willing to take any action necessary to prevent another murder attempt. I've already assigned guards to keep an eye on you within close vicinity, and if anything happens, to take proper action to assure your safety.
My relief escalated, despite the fact that it was Rainbow Dash saying this. My emotions were a chaotic web that had become tangled by an accidental intrusion by some kind of force. This pony speaking to me didn't seem like the same mare as earlier that day, but more like the Rainbow Dash I once called my sibling, causing my thoughts to twist and converge like a raging tornado. However, I knew I had to say something, so I just played along. Many thanks, ma'am.
No need to thank me. I'm just playing my part in keeping this place in order. We'll catch this dirty rat in no time, even if we couldn't see their face on the cameras. We have means of finding them beyond just surveillance. Now, go off to lunch.
Yes, ma'am. I answered, watching as Rainbow Dash turned and walked off to elsewhere. I had no idea where to go for lunch, and luckily, Absentia had thought ahead, her steps echoing amongst the large room as she approached me.
Well, considering you're still here and Dash's demeanor, I'm guessing your claims turned out true.
Yeah, she actually investigated the situation, and it turns out there's definitely a pony out for my head. However, she's already taken proper action to avoid another situation like what happened earlier, so I shouldn't have any trouble going forward.
Good.
But I want you to remember one thing, Scoots. That mare is not here to protect any pony except herself. The only reason she said that was to make herself look good. And judging by your response just now, it worked. Absentia's words made all of my initial relief disappear. She was right. How could I have let Rainbow Dash assure me of anything? She doesn't care about any pony's safety or well-being. She'd rather see them die for free spectra. Absentia recognized my anger of being manipulated by Dash so easily, and quickly worked to calm me down.
Hey, don't beat yourself up, kid. Dash is a master of manipulating the mind, so there was no doubt you'd believe her. I was the same, up until I learned through experience that anything she says is poisonous to the mind. Let this be your first lesson on figuring out how Dash works, and I do hope that it's one you won't easily forget.
Don't worry, I won't.
I'm glad to hear that, because I have something to show you. Something you aren't going to like, but I will set the tone for just how evil and heartless she is.
Absentia started back towards the elevator, to which I followed and watched as she selected a floor labeled as B. I immediately guessed that it stood for the basement, feeling a chill slither up my spine as the elevator doors closed and we began our descent deeper into the bowels of the factory. As we began to lower past the lowest floors of the building, it suddenly began to get cold. It wasn't cold enough to make my teeth chatter, but more like the type of breeze that blows right before a rainstorm. Something that told me we were deep underground in a secret area that only certain ponies knew of. I didn't know what to expect as the elevator came to a stop and the door slid open, revealing a dark, damp room that carried the scent of mildew. The only light was the bright rays glowing from countless storage tubes of spectra littered all throughout the massive area, giving a rainbow-like hue to the entire vicinity. Where the hell were we? What is this place? The basement, also known as the Spectra storage room. The sight of the dimly lit room made my blood run cold. Here I was, in a room of victims to the Pegasus device, now visible by only the radiant colors of their coats. There was an array of every color imaginable within locked cages containing the storage tubes, and the more I examined the room, the more I started to feel sick. I walked further into the room, admiring the countless colors and trying to keep my stomach at ease. 5 locked cages were lined up on both sides of the room, leading to the end of the room where 6 streams of spectra glowed in 6 massive storage tubes. However, the spectra was not filled to the top, but only a quarter of the way full. Do you see it, Scoots? Yeah. The spectra tubes are low of their contents. Exactly. Lower than they have ever been in the factory's existence. So you must know what that means, right? I thought hard. Then I jumped upon remembering the transmission earlier that morning. Rainbow Dash had mentioned that the amounts of spectra were dropping, and as a solution, a meeting would be held. The puzzle pieces assembled quickly, revealing a horrid realization that made every speck of my fur stand up straight. Sabotage. Exactly. I've seen this coming ever since the first day she threw one of our own workers into the machine, claiming he had died in a factory accident and did not want to waste his spectra. The real truth is that Pegasi are starting to break the usual plan Dash assembled to keep spectra production going without a hitch. The past 3 flying tests were passed with no failures, showing that Pegasi are starting to be able to pass the flying exam without failure, breaking the stead that had kept spectra production on a consistent schedule. That raises issues that could lead to the factory being found out of its true nature, seeing if there's no rainbow after a scheduled storm. That's going to raise suspicion over time. Dash got lucky that at the time of the decrease, the winter months had started, so she's had time to plan, and without fresh Pegasi to feed the machine, there's only one thing I can see her resorting to, and I truly think it's already happening. Workers have gone missing in the past 2 months, resulting in Dash only being able to make 2 rainbows in that time. She cloaked it to weather ponies as a factory incident, but it's really just her stalling for time to collect enough of us to produce a rainbow. However, that's not where the horror ends. She's also planning to rig the flying exam to assure failure, but that's still being worked on. Therefore, every pony in this place is a potential target, including you and me. Do you remember what she said earlier regarding arrivals? I thought back, immediately remembering that Dash had stated that arrivals would be here in 2 days. But with this new information, it was clear she meant that workers would mysteriously end up deceased in 2 days' time. My stomach turned at the horrifying realization. So to keep herself clear of what goes on in this place, she'd rather kill her own workers than face the consequences of her crimes? Exactly. Along with intentionally sabotaging innocent gifted flyers just to remain undiscovered. Now do you understand just how twisted and malevolent that mare truly is? I froze in place, but I nodded my head in full assurance of understanding the clear message she had brought me down here to deliver. Good. Then let's get out of here. This place makes me sick. Suddenly, a sound from across the room made Absentia and I freeze. It was the sound of the elevator arriving. Why was some pony here during lunchtime? I didn't have time to think further upon Absentia snapping me out of my thoughts. Quick, hide! Commanded Absentia, rushing to the far side of the room and hiding in a darkened area. I rushed to the other side of the room, hiding behind one of the Spectra tubes where I couldn't be seen. Upon covering my muzzle to silence my breathing, I heard the elevator dock, following with the doors opening. 2 sets of hooves echoed upon exiting the compact box, following shortly with a voice I recognized vividly.
Clarify to me the current spectra levels.
Rainbow Dash's voice commanded to the other Pegasus. Upon the other pony's response, it was clearly a male.
Our current levels are 38.6% on average, nowhere near what we need for a perfect rainbow, which is possible at around 75.8%.
Rainbow Dash grunted, clearly stressed and disappointed at the result.
Ugh! Damn it! I thought we could make that up in a week. The weather ponies upstairs won't accept another day for me to get what I need.
She was in a major panic. It was clear that she was out of options, and upon thinking further about the current situation, my blood froze. This wasn't just a checkup on spectral levels. It was a setup for murder.
Overmare, please calm down. I believe you'll find a solution to this. For better clarification, we only need at least 2 Pegasi to fill the gap, and I'm sure you'll find 2 in no time.
Upon seeing Rainbow Dash's face, I knew my assumption was correct. Her eyes gleamed of malevolence, and her lips were curved into a devious smile. So I did my best to find a happy place in the darkness of this factory.
2, you say?
Affirmative, Overmare.
Huh. That's actually not too hard to get. But let me ask you something first.
She had paused briefly, stepping forward toward the giant tubes.
Do you remember what I said to you when I made you a part of my factory?
I could read between the lines. She was about to corner him with manipulation.
Of course. I swore to obey you and do my duty till the day I die serving you.
That was the final nail in the coffin. Knowing what was coming, I tried to blink out the horror, but no matter what I tried, the factory refused to spare me.
Correct. So, if I were to ask you a simple favor, would you do it for me?
Of course, ma'am.
Her smile extended, knowing she had him wrapped around her hoof.
That's good,
she answered, turning around and walking back toward the other worker.
Then, you wouldn't mind dying for me, would you?
The Pegasus jumped, and his face immediately turned pale. He'd signed his death certificate.
Overmare, but forgive my questioning, but why?
As I recall, you said you'd obey me no matter what. So, will you keep your word, or was your commitment just a lie all along?
She questioned, guilt-tripping him into submission. The Pegasus was trapped, and he knew that no matter what he chose, he was dead. I just kept my muzzle covered and continued to listen. A pause followed, and I was expecting to hear the sound of flesh tearing and blood splatter, but my heart turned to ice upon hearing the next response.
For the good of the factory and your success, I will humbly give my life for you, Overmare.
I was beyond bewildered. I never expected him to actually accept the request, but apparently, That was the amount of control Dash had on these workers. I had to hold myself back from retching, awaiting the inevitable conclusion to this whole situation.
I'm glad to hear that. Your loyalty was tested, and you remained true to your word. Therefore, I'll be sure that your spectra shines bright in the sky after the settling of the next storm.
Thank you, Overmare. I'm glad to have served you.
Dash chuckled, following with a response that felt like a reward for the stallion's services.
You're cute.
Then the sudden sound of the blade piercing his flesh met the room, echoing in my ears like a hoof against a chalkboard. I shivered as I heard the stallion start to choke on his own blood and emit a gurgling sound that I can only describe as a death rasp. I couldn't look, and just closed my eyes tight and covered my ears to spare myself of the horrid sounds. But they still broke through and permeated my skull like a hive of angry bees. I knew that Dash wouldn't do too much damage, because she had to keep herself clean of any treason. My guess was that she had stabbed him in the neck, and his cause of death would either be asphyxiation or blood loss. It felt like eternity by the time I heard the stallion's body collapse and gurgling stop, finally opening my eyes again and watching as Dash approached the corpse with that same devilish grin.
What an idiot. He actually thought I gave a damn for his services. All he's worth to me is another successful save in my current struggle. Best get this guy upstairs before he loses every bit of his color.
Her words were so cold and careless, causing my anger to rise yet again. I couldn't believe that this was the same Pegasus that I used to train with. And just thinking about the memories of her shaping me into the flyer I became prior to this whole nightmare made me shed a tear. As she'd said, she grabbed a husk and dragged it into the elevator, proceeding back up to the factory floor. Upon her exit, I finally let myself breathe again and cried. Absentia quickly trotted to my position, putting her hooves on my shoulders as some sort of comfort. It's all right. Let it out. I know how you feel. Death is no simple thing to experience. I lunged into Absentia's chest and hugged her tightly, immediately surprising her. But she didn't push me away. Instead, she wrapped her hooves around me and rubbed my back. It was a feeling I hadn't felt in such a long time, and Absentia knew it, allowing me to just weep in the room of several remains of innocent Pegasi who had been taken out of this world for no reason. My fit of letting my emotions out lasted for a long 20 minutes, and upon pulling away from Absentia, she smiled for the first time since I'd met her the previous night. Apparently, she'd seen or felt something that struck a part of her that made her feel like her old regular self for just a moment in the space. In return, I smiled as well, somewhat proud that I gave Absentia the chance to feel like her old self again, even if it was only for just a second. The warmth of a hug isn't something I've felt in over a decade. For just a moment, I remembered something. The last time I was ever embraced like that. I have a sister, and she hugged me before I left to take the exam. Her voice was full of melancholy and happiness. I tried to remember the last time I'd hugged a pony, and it didn't take long. I had last wrapped my hooves around Aurora before she'd faced her assured death, giving me time to find an escape. Her hooves had been so warm and delicate, like a mother's embrace to a foal. She had known the outcome of her act, but she'd given her life to save mine. A true act of friendship and loyalty. The memory had erased the horrors that I had just witnessed for just a minute. But upon coming back to reality, I knew we had to leave before Dash would become aware of our absence above. I turned back to Absentia, speaking some words to assure her to never forget that memory she'd recollected. That's right. You do have a sister outside of these walls somewhere, and I'm sure she's still searching for you. Never let Dash take your memories away again. Hold on to that image of your sibling and never, ever let it disappear. A tear rolled down Absentia's left cheek, wrapping me in her hooves yet again. Thank you. Thank you so much, Scoots. I never thought I'd find a light in the darkness of this place. But you've given me hope. Hope that I can find a way out. I hugged her tightly, feeling my heart flutter in my chest. I'm glad I could help you find the light, I stated, releasing her and pulling myself to my hooves. Let's get out of here. I agree. Let's go. We carefully avoided any of the blood on the ground and made our way back to the elevator shaft. The floor of it clean of any crimson stains, meaning Dash had been careful to cover her tracks. Upon stepping in and Absentia pushing the proper button to the factory floor, the door slid shut and the compact box began to ascend. In about 20 seconds, the elevator docked and opened to the site of the Pegasus device just off to the left. The factory floor dead and quiet to our relief. Once again, there was no trace of Dash's act, and that made it clear to me that she had been killing Pegasi long enough to know how to remain undetected. It was no wonder why she had been Overmare for so long, and a chill ran down my spine at the thought. Well, kid, if you don't mind, I'm going to head for the showers to get any residue from those blades off of me. Not at all. I'm just going to head back to the room. I'm exhausted after all that. See you in a bit, Scoots. Absentia finalized, turning and heading for the showers. With that said, I pushed the button for the second floor and started the trip back to Absentia's room. The doors closed again, and like earlier, the elevator began its ascent. The rooms were on the highest floor of the building on the far east side, so it was about a 5-minute walk. Upon the elevator meeting its stop, the door slid open and I began the walk down the long hall to the right. As I walked, I got the feeling that I was being watched, but the hall was very dimly lit, so it always felt ominous. I arrived at Absentia's door after a minute of walking, and upon reaching for the knob, I froze. A voice met my ears. Well, it looks like we meet again, worker. The voice of Rainbow Dash spoke from the shadows. Seems strange that our paths keep crossing, wouldn't you say so? Affirmative, ma'am. Perhaps it's just a coincidence? There's no such thing as coincidences, worker. There's only destiny and fate. And I must say, both of those have really played a heavy part in the time you've been here. Why is that? I'm not sure, ma'am. Oh, I think you do, worker. Or should I call you Scootaloo? My heart dropped. She knew. I scrambled my thoughts on what to do, but it was as if I couldn't move an inch. Surprised? You really shouldn't be. You see, you were trapped in that machine for 10 hours, and unless you have gills or are not a living pony,
You should have very well perished. So, what are you? A ghost? A doppelganger possessed by her spirit? Whatever you are, it doesn't matter, because it's all gonna end the same as it did all those years ago. You can come back however many times as you want, but it'll always end with you going through the blades of the Pegasus to fight Scoots. In fact, please do keep coming back. Getting to see you die over and over is a sight I'd love to relive over and over.
She was just as cold as the first time, with no sign of the rainbow dash I used to know. However, that wasn't important. I needed to focus on how I was going to counter and kill her, but my target was somewhere in the dark where I couldn't see her.
What? No words for your sister? Don't you still love me, Scoots? No! How could I love some pony who killed me over selfishness and greed? Selfishness and greed? I didn't do anything of such nature. In fact, I made sure you were the most beautiful rainbow Equestria had ever seen. Ponies admired you, Scoots. I carried on your legacy by marking you down in history as one of the most perfect rainbows ever produced. At the cost of my life, you murdered me and my friends for your own pleasure, you bitch. You mentored me, taught me, and took me under your own wing as a sibling. And you repay me with cold-hearted betrayal and eternal darkness. What the fuck went wrong with you? Why did you become such a heartless monster?
Tears began to flow, and my emotions were flooding out like a volcanic eruption. Then a voice broke through the temporary silence. A voice I didn't recognize.
I can answer that, my dear.
The voice was deep and made every hair on my body stand stiff. Suddenly, my entire body was met with an electrifying sensation, dropping me instantly like a rock in water. My vision became fuzzy, unable to move or speak anything. Then I saw a pony walk into the dim light of the hall. They were tall and dressed in black, cloaking their identity and making me realize who they were. They were the pony that had shut the door of the Pegasus device.
I must admit that I'm quite surprised to see your face again, Scootaloo. But don't worry. You don't have to feel the pain of those blades again. We have plans for you. Seeing killing you would be pointless. You'll just come back again, and we can't risk you interfering with our business. No. Instead, we plan to commence you as one of the best orchestrators this factory has ever seen, making your existence liable. Miss Dash here was our first, and you'll be our second. So rejoice in your new awakening. There will be pain, but only temporarily. So be a good girl and go to sleep. When you open your eyes, you will be gifted a whole new life without the pain of your beloved sister betraying you.
I couldn't move or object. I wanted to run, analyze his statements, and find absentia, but I was pinned. My vision grew blurry as my eyes closed from the exhaustion and pain singeing my nerves. Darkness drowned me, and all I remember before losing control over myself was the cool feeling of water slithering down my throat. I'm sorry, every pony. I lost.